Hello, everybody. I'm Carlos, and I'm here with my good friend Levi, and we are your friendly neighborhood holy chatters. Peace be upon you, because we are talking about peace. All these, the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about peace. Last week we talked a little bit about Jesus talking, saying, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for them they will be called sons and daughters of God." And we kind of compared with what the Roman Empire thought of peace, achieved through strength, war, and there's winners and losers, right? And we that that episode that we started with had a quote: uh, "If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart." So, what a wonderful quote from Lao Tse, a wonderful Chinese philosopher, correct? And before we move on any further, please like us, subscribe on YouTube if you are watching us on there, and like us, pass it on to everybody who would like to know more about this or are interested in all these kind of things. And if you want to, if you're tired of seeing our faces and said, "Okay, I have enough of you," or just you can listen to us on SoundCloud or Spotify. So, what do we have for stuff for us today, my good friend Holy Chatter?
Oh, let me tell you, you should be so excited because today is the sodomy episode. Yes, welcome everybody. If you have kids in the car, go ahead and turn this off and listen to it later. We are moving from peace in the world to peace in our cities and neighborhoods. And as I thought about this subject, I thought, what's one of the really famous stories from the Bible about conflict in the city or the neighborhood? And then I remembered that story where God completely blows up an entire city. And I thought, perfect, perfect, right? Now, of course, interpretively, I'm not saying God did that, but that is how the storyline goes and what you may have heard. I don't know how much you know about the true story of Sodom and Gomorrah, but it is where we get the word sodomy from, but we don't have to talk about that so much. Probably you've heard that it had to do with sexuality in some form or another when you've read that story or heard about that story in church or on TV somewhere or in a book. But the depth of that story goes way beyond anything to do with sexuality. The story kind of goes like this. There's a couple of messengers of God who visit Sodom in the evening, and there's this guy named Lot who's sitting in the gateway of the city. So I don't know if he's a gossip or what, but he likes to know what's going on in the city. Maybe he was an official and he was watching out to see if there were any strangers. But when he saw these two strangers visit town, he invited them into his home. He washed their feet and allowed them to spend the night and give them some food and all that great stuff. And these messengers were like, no, 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 we'll just sleep in the square, the town square, and then we'll move on. And that's when the moody music started in the movie. And I was like, ooh, ooh, like, and Lot, there's like a close up on Lot's face, and he gets very grave and serious, and he's like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to sleep in the town square. So long story short, they come to stay with him, but the problem is that this gang of people show up to harm these messengers in a way that we don't need to go into detail about. But if you want to know where phrases like gang rape came from, this is a good place to start here in Sodom and Gomorrah. So these people have shown up to just destroy these strangers who have come to town, and of course Lot is trying to defend them. The story goes on. And at the end of it, it appears that maybe God destroys the entire town, except for Lot and his family. So, what's the point of this story? There's lots of things you can pull out of it, but one of the main points of the story is that God gets really frustrated with people when they're not peaceful and hospitable to others, particularly strangers, people from other places, people from other countries, other nations, other towns, people of cultural differences. God, at least in our faith tradition, right, Carlos? our God seems to be really bothered when we don't take care of people, when we don't promote their peace and their well-being, but instead try to take advantage of them. Don't you think that's a fair interpretation of what we're talking about here?
It is right on, yes. And there is a lot of I cannot remember exactly how many uh passages in the Hebrew scriptures, or what we sometimes call the Old Testament. It is about take care of the children, the widow, and the stranger, or the foreigner, or the immigrant, however you want to translate that word, and over and over and over again. And he says, and God says, because you were a stranger in the land, that is why. I mean, but yes, right, right on, right on. So go on. I liked your sodomy thing. So,
Yeah, so basically, when we think about peace in the neighborhood or peace in the city, one of the values that we're talking about here is this value of hospitality and love of your neighbor. There's this fun chapter in the Bible that lots of people like to exploit. It's a book in the Bible called Leviticus, near and dear to my heart, as my name is Levi. And honestly, it's the worst book in the Bible. What happens is you're a new Christian, you start reading the Bible, you go through Genesis and Exodus, and you're like, this is cool because there's like a creation story and there's a flood and there's Moses and he's parting the sea. And then you get to Leviticus and it's like, here's all this gross stuff that you should not do. And it goes into like bodily fluids and every gross thing you can think about and all the rules of the people of Israel. And it's very graphic, very gross. And in Leviticus chapter 19, it keeps going on about this stuff. It keeps going on about what kind of clothes to wear and who gets to sleep with who and when they get to sleep with them and all this stuff. And then randomly in the middle of the chapter, it says, "Oh, and love your neighbor as yourself." By the way, and that's just buried in a bunch of other rules, and nobody would know that that was that important, except that somehow people picked up on that and continue to make that the center of our faith tradition. So that hundreds of years later, when this lawyer comes up to Jesus and says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, well, you've read your Bible. What do you think? And this guy knows 613 commands in the Hebrew Torah, the first five books of the Bible. And he picks out the right two: love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So clearly, there was a tradition in Jewish culture at that time that these were very important rules or commandments. And then Jesus picks up on it too and says, you're right. Those are the greatest commands: love God and love your neighbor. So, in all that mess of rules in Leviticus, this one rule stands out as special: love your neighbor. So, if you want to have peace in your city or your neighborhood, that's a good way to start. But, Carlos, my question is, how do we even do that?
oh, right. You need to bring cookies to your neighbor, introduce yourself,
Chocolate chip,
and
warm chocolate chip cookies.
warm chocolate chip. Now, well, I think that the word love here is, we always kind of, not maybe always, but oftentimes we go with the idea of romantic love, like you have to have some sort of feeling for it. And I think it's more about caring for the other person, and we come back to what we said in the first series of these podcast that we're talking about a theme, um, the well-being, that you care for the well-being of that person sincerely, and you do what you can for that person to have that and that to be that way, to have the well-being. So therefore, then you are caring and loving that person or that neighbor. I mean, it is not necessarily, but it could be your next door neighbor, although it's everybody that you are in contact with, or anybody who you're in your influence, everybody who is around you, that you do your best. So I will give you, for instance, my wife here, she decided to have because she was getting very angry and frustrated driving up and down the highway, because she has to do that to get to her job. She is also a minister. And so to get to one, she has to go to a really busy intersection, or highway. So she was getting frustrated. She was getting. She said, "Okay, this is how I'm gonna show to love my neighbor. I'm gonna go in my own uh, lane. I'm gonna respect um the speed limit, and I'm gonna let everybody pass around me and let it in and wave at people when they get in, or if they let me in, wave and be courteous. And that is just a simple way. It says my life is so much better. My life is I'm not stressed out when I drive out, and not because I just go on and I don't have to be weaving in and out. And so I think that that is just a little taste of what loving your neighbor is, and that is you caring for the well-being, yes, of yourself, but also of everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I have a friend who said the same thing, that just driving the speed limit changed his joy on the highway because everybody else just flies by and he just coasts and does his thing, you know. Yeah, sometimes I think we don't do those little things because we think they're not good enough or they're not enough. They don't make a big enough impact. But what if all it's doing is actually making you a better person? I mean, that alone probably is enough to be worth doing it, just on a selfish level, to be able to have some healing or some joy in your own life. But that has to rub off on the people that you come in contact with, that they're also going to feel that vibe from you when you have that peace and that joy. Um, when we think about loving your neighbor too, one of the reasons that I think it's important for people to get plugged into some kind of faith community is because faith communities usually intentionally engage their neighbors. I know at Kaylee Community we have a grocery store model where we give away food to folks who are experiencing food insecurity. There are lots of churches that do things with food or with homelessness or with mental health, clothing. I mean, you name it. In the United Methodist Church, we do a lot of things, foster care. We take care of folks who are re-entering life from having been incarcerated. So there are all these really cool ministries that are all about loving your neighbor. And so, even if it's not a Christian faith community, getting plugged into any faith community is going to help you to engage in a structured way in loving your neighbor too.
Right. And I mean, you can be volunteering. I mean, you don't even have to necessarily see a person. You can just volunteer, going to let's say, the food bank and pack things that they will be delivered to people. I mean, that's a way to do it. But I was amazed just the other day. I went to Target and with my children. It was in the holidays, kind of getting December and getting all the presents for everybody and everything. And we went to Target, and the cashier, uh, was there, and obviously, and we were talking, kind of, chit chat, and it's casual conversation, nothing deep. But then I just saw, uh, kind of something out of the blue, kind of thing. I said, "So you're getting out of here soon?" And she started to tell me the whole story of her life, like the husband was, or the partner, I think, I don't know, the husband, but the partner was ill and had to go to the hospital, and it was a rough time for them, and she was looking forward to getting out so that she could be with him, and also, trying to get more hours to pay. And I mean, she said she just well, and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry that you're going through that." And I said, "Hey, uh, uh, I mean, maybe it is a very Christian of me to say, like, very Christian, meaning in queer quotes, or very Christianese to say, I'll be praying for you," kind of thing. I said, and I said something in the lines that, hopefully, I hope that things go better. I-
Yeah.
just an easy. It was the life, like, pouring out, and she didn't know that I was a minister or anything. She didn't know anything, so. Maybe you just have that little door that maybe somebody needs to be listened to. Particularly
Yeah.
now that I'm sorry, that there is this epidemic of loneliness in our country. So,
That's true. People are very lonely and coming out of COVID and um, I have found that I think a lot of us, me included, sometimes use the COVID experience in the virtual world to hide sometimes from the world, to isolate ourselves, and we just don't feel like getting out and socializing or interacting with people, and that just perpetuates that loneliness. But just small things like that go a long way to loving your neighbor. I know sometimes I'll pull up, actually almost every day, I'll pull up to a corner where someone is panhandling on the corner trying to raise money for themselves. And Depending on what kind of mood I'm in on any given day, I'm either extremely judgmental about it or my heart is moved by it and I give them too much money or somewhere in between. But what I have learned is sometimes it is okay and enough just to treat them like a human being and smile and say hello. Even if you have no intention of giving them any money, they're still a human being. And some of them really, really need that money. Some may not. Some are somewhere in between. But at the end of the day, being a human being, that it goes a long way for both of you to make eye contact, to say, "How are you doing?" And again, like you said, Carlos, listen to their story for the 30 seconds you're stuck at the red light, just to be a person. Obviously, sometimes you're going to feel your spiritual side move you to do more than that. But at a minimum, one thing to do to love your neighbor is just to remember that we're all human beings and not to dehumanize anybody, which seems to be really popular right now in the culture.
Yeah, it is very simple to make the other, whatever the other is. So I think loving is, as I said, you don't have to feel anything per se, other than treating them humanely, with dignity, with care, uh, and with compassion. And always, I think, giving the benefit of the doubt to anybody. I mean, why would think that somebody will is after you or is in the wrong, whatever, since we haven't heard him or her, or just because how they look or whatever it is that maybe puts us off. And maybe even and what I ask people to do in those situations is ask, well, why would you feel threatened, scared, fearful, angry, anxious when you encounter somebody,
Yeah.
anybody, and make a note as to why, and kind of start to dig in um, into what is going on inside of us that maybe was a previous experience, maybe I don't know what some many things that happen that color our experience with some folks. So what is that? And be conscious about it and ask yourself why. Why do I feel this way?
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I hope people realize as they listen, like we're kind of getting more into the realm of things you can control because when you talk about world peace, it feels so out of my hands, right? But as we get into like city and neighborhood,
Mhm.
I'm starting
Mhm.
to feel like I have a tiny influence on, what kind of peace we could see in our city or our neighborhood. And so next week, as we continue this conversation, we're going to go down from the city and the neighborhood down to the family unit. And there you start to have even more influence and power over peace or not peace, maybe conflict and other things in your relationships. But we're going to talk about that next week. So we hope you've really enjoyed our conversation about peace in the city and neighborhoods. Go read Genesis chapter 19. Scratch your head about what the heck is going on. Send your questions to us, comment in the YouTube channel, and we'll see y'all next time at Holy Chat.
That was easy.
Peace.